Welcome to Gray to Great, the podcast where we will pull back the curtain on what it truly takes to thrive as a corporate retirement plan advisor in today's tech-powered business world. I'm Dan Dal Degan, but all my friends call me Triple D. As a former sales leader and CEO and now board member of the parent company of the Great Gray Trust Company, I know that success in this field goes beyond the numbers. In each episode, I'm going to team up with one of your peer retirement plan advisors to bring you the strategies that separate the best from the rest. From prospecting and referral business to challenger selling and tech adoption, we're diving deep into the parts of the business that too many of us overlook. Whether you're here to sharpen your skills or if you're looking for the next big idea, this is where the playbook gets rewritten. So get ready for sharp, actionable insights that'll take your practice to the next level. Because in sales, there's no gray area.
I was going through my spiel and they were kind of looking at me and they were kind of being, okay, we have a question. And so I said, why don't we just meet one-on-one, right? So after the meeting, we sat down with them and I encouraged them. I said, hey, this is something that you guys need to do. Never putting money away before in his life. Fast forward to the day, the plan's worth about $22 million in assets. We've got like 85% participation rate. This gentleman called me. He's ready to retire. He's got $800,000 in his retirement account and more assets than what the plan had when I first took it over. But after those years, I went home that night and I just told my wife, I said, today was a wonderful day. I was able to change somebody's life 20 years ago.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Gray to Great. I'm Dan Dal Degan, our host, and I'm joined today by Lloyd Engleman with Alkeme Financial Services, part of the Accelerate Retirement Plan Group out of Riverside, California. Welcome, Lloyd.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Dan.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I met you at the RPAG session in Chicago and delighted that you are coming on to our podcast to chat with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. It's exciting for us to get our name out there a little bit and talk a little about what we think about the industry. It's awesome.
I love it. Well, you've got a lot to share from our pre-conversation teeing up this discussion. And I'd love to start with your origin story, Lloyd. You've got an interesting tale about how you got into retirement planning and then some real successes that you've had that we'll get into here. But tell us your origin story.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have a buddy of mine. I had a kind of winding down little computer company that I had at the time, and I had a friend of mine, wanted me to get in the business with him. I go, he goes, yeah, he goes, with this business needs people who are going to do it the right thing for the client, So I took my test, got licensed. It was right during the .com debacle back in 2000 when I got my license. I'll never forget about it. The NASDAQ was at 5,000 and I watched the market go down to 1,500 and I'm trying to go out and gather assets. And, at that point it was nerve wracking. I was fortunate enough to have some friends of mine that gave me an opportunity to manage some money for them. But it was still uncomfortable. Right. And, about a year later, one of my clients that I had as an individual, he called me up. He goes, hey, our insurance broker's in here trying to sell us a 401k plan. Do you do that? And I go, yeah, of course. Right. So I wrote my first 401k plan in like 2001 and didn't know anything about it and just got fortunate and took off from there. And I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole aspect, learning different from what the individual financial planning was to what the plan business was all about. And it was very exciting. It was something new. And then after I got into it, it was something that I was going, these people that are working for these companies, they just don't have access to advisors. And it was really kind of a self-worth for me to be able to say, I can go and sit with these people that make nothing, that really need they need some type of access to an advisor. So it was awesome. And ever since then, I just enjoyed every aspect of it.
That's wonderful. And did you find, Lloyd, that coming from the technology industry, that the skills that made you effective there, dealing with human beings and getting them to share their stories and developing trust, that translated well to what you do now?
Yeah, I think it was all about the communication, right? We were in communication out of it. And, these, like I said, these participants, they just look at you like, what are you talking about? They don't know any of the acronyms. They know nothing about what's going on. And, just to be able to get them comfortable and share your story and trust you about what you're doing is the right thing for them over time. And, we've stayed with the same model, diversify your portfolio, give it time, manage your portfolio according to your risk and just let it go. We've been able, after these long years now, we've had some pretty good success stories about some of the participants. It's been really, really awesome to see. awesome to see.
That reinforces a message that we hear often in these conversations, Lloyd, with very successful plan advisors like yourself, is that when they're dealing with plan participants or even plan sponsors, the trust that you build early in that relationship, just by being authentic, being a great listener, that's what sustains these long-term relationships. And it's always refreshing to hear that reinforced, especially as we mentor young people in our careers and try to help them see what makes a difference. And speaking of authenticity, I think you've got a great story to share about a celebrity at a golf outing, about human connection. I'd love to hear about that for our listeners.
Yeah, one of the nice things about being in this business, we create with such good relationship with our partners out there, the record keepers, the third-party administrators, advisory groups. And, it's a small niche business, being in this for so long. Every time you go to a conference, you see somebody you haven't seen in 5-10 years that you first got in business with. I was fortunate enough to be invited to an event in Columbus, Ohio with Nationwide, and it was a celebrity tournament. The guest speakers that night doing the fire chat was Jerry Rice and Peyton Manning. And so we were all sitting around the tables and listening to these guys chat. After it got done, they said, well, now you guys, there's a white envelope on your table. Choose that, pull that envelope up, and that's going to tell you who you're playing with tomorrow. And so I was fortunate enough to get chosen with Peyton Manning. And I've been a longtime Bronco fan too. So I got to ride in the cart with him and play golf with him for 18 holes. And it was just, getting back to the human element, you see somebody like that with that status and that kind of a guy. But, he was so engaged the whole time. He never got on his phone. The one time he said, hey, guys, we should take this putt. I think we should take this shot. He was real engaged and interested about what our business was about. And he loved to hear my story where I was able to build my business. And then, I was fortunate enough to be able to get acquired a few years ago, by a company with Alkeme, and it's been fantastic this whole stretch. So he was just awesome person to be around.
That is a great story, and he's pretty funny, isn't he?
Oh my gosh, he's just
great sense of humor.
Some of the stories I can't tell you, but it was really he was really a funny man.
That's great. And I always thought watching him, and there's some other celebrities on TV that impress you this way. Do you think they'd be effective in any field they would choose? He could have been an effective financial advisor, technology salesman, CEO, executive, because he just understands human connection.
Yeah, he was genuinely happy to hear my story. He said, that's great. He goes, I'd love to hear stories like this, and that's cool. For somebody like that to really be engaged, it was a fantastic trip.
I love it. So let's shift a little bit here to another topic I know that you are a master of and you've talked about, and that is outsourcing. How you make your team and your organization even bigger virtually through extended partnerships. I'd love to hear you expand on that, which is how we met through the RPAG session.
Yeah, it's and I've been fortunate in my career to surround myself with good quality people that were very, very good at what they were doing. I know when I first was up, I was by myself the whole time getting into this 4 division and business. And, it was struggling. It was trying to, how am I going to get better? How am I going to move up market? I was writing plans, $1 million and stuff like that. And so I was fortunate enough to, going back to the same story where one of my best friends asked me about, hey, do you do 401k plans? He had a friend of his that was a pretty good advisor down in Orange County. His name is Michael Kastner. He's been in the business for a long time. And so I was fortunate enough to get with them and have those guys help me grow my business and learn a little bit more about how to manage the bigger plans. So, the industry has evolved over time. As you're building your business, especially for young advisors, you're building your business, you're going to get to a point where you're going to say, okay, what's the next step? As you've built a nice book and you're surrounding you're really getting caught up in a lot of service work, right? So what do we need to do to get that better? Well, finally legislation has helped us in the 401k world, right? They've recognized, listening to advisors, what needs to happen out there in the 401k business with the automatic enrollments, the automatic escalation. And now they're giving us the opportunity to outsource a lot of the services inside of this. The MEP, the multiple employer plans, have been around for years. And what it was, you had to be in some type of an association, be part of a multiple employer plan. And what it does, it gives you access to scale, right? Outsourcing some stuff. So then in 2019, with the Secure Act 1.0, they introduced the pooled employer plan. So where you don't have to be part of an organization anymore. So an attorney firm can be in the same plan as a construction firm. A medical group can be in the same as a sales or a retail stop. And the whole thing about it is when we talk about how it's scaling my business to where I can put my clients inside a pooled solution, which saves me time and money because I can use one lineup now. And we've got the administration part of it that's outsourced. So on the advisor side, it's going to really, when you go to build your reports at the end of the quarter, I only have to build one report for 35 plans now. Before I had to build one report for each one of those plans. On our side, it's good, but most important is on what's going on with the pooled employer plans is with the plan sponsors, right? We can minimize their risk and their liability by outsourcing the administration work, outsourcing the investment part of it as us acting as a 338 advisor, and to just take that liability away from them. And to me, it's just the new way the business is going. You've got to adopt, you've got to find some type of a contract to whatever advisors, or you can build your own contracts out there. But I truly believe this is the next wave of where the retirement plan industry is going.
Yeah, that's a wonderful trend line to give plan participants more optionality. When you are describing those vehicles or really any other kind of financial instrument in which you might invest for a plan, how do you balance, Lloyd, the naivete or the lack of pattern recognition that somebody who doesn't do this for a living, a plan participant, might bring in a way that educates them and makes them feel comfortable without them feeling like uninformed? It's a real delicate balance. How do you arrive at that?
Well, you got to understand, it's like I tell, I've got a new person who just got licensed in my office, and I'm trying to get to him on his level. And I just told him, I go, listen, when you're out talking to a lot of these plan sponsors that we work with, I know you're new in the business, but you got to be comfortable to know that you know so much more than they do, right? Because they are looking for guidance. And there's no difference between that plan sponsor and that participant. That participant has no idea, unfortunately, about what's going on. We weren't taught that in school, but in classes for us to take. It was like, hey, go out in the workforce and figure out your financial situation, right? So if you can just, get with that participant and take time and explain a little bit about what's going on and how this will affect your life over a long period of time, it's just getting down on their level. I'm a dirt farmer from Nebraska, right? I mean, if I can do this, anybody can do this, right? And it's just having that compassion about those participants to try to get them to where they need to be.
Love it. So you've hit on a theme there that as you describe the people that have helped you in your career, it sounds like very selflessly. And I love that story because I too have been the beneficiary of great mentoring in my career.
Yeah.
Expand on that a little bit if you can, where you found mentoring and then how you play that role now at this stage of your career with other people in your firm like you were just describing.
Yeah, it's all about taking advantage of those situations and those relationships. You got to put trust in these people. There are so many good advisors that do what we do, but there's a lot of advisors just do this. We call them two-plan Tonys, right? They get in and they may owe the business owner and they take over 401k plan. So as far as what's out there, there's so much business to be written. There's so much help that needs to be done in our industry. So why not surround your people that people have been in it before you have and learn the business? It's such an advantage. The tools, we joined RPAG probably 6 years ago. I tell everybody, my gosh, if I'd had the RPAG tools when I got into this business back in the early 2000s, I think my business would have been a lot better because of the technology integration that they're doing to make your job easier is the whole thing it is. You're going to have plenty of opportunities, but you got to get to a point where you can have something that's repetitive that you can trust on your tools and the services and the people around you going to make your business so much better.
Yeah. Tell us more about that, because the idea of repetition, getting reps in, which is a popular phrase in sports, Peyton Manning would tell us this too, right? Getting reps as a quarterback, developing your pattern recognition. How does that apply to the world of a plan advisor?
Well, why do you want to reinvent the wheel? Yeah. You got this company out there with RPAG that, they over time, they have built a plan and a system for advisors by advisors, basically, right? They took all of this knowledge that they had from all the advice, say, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? And they were had the vision enough to integrate this whole system and put these things into place for you can just plug in and as an advisor, and then you have everything that you need to manage plans, right? And the thing about it is we need to make sure that our plan sponsors are getting taken care of. It's all about defendable, retainable, and to be able to repeat what they're doing and document that process. And with the tools and stuff that you have that's available out there in the industry to really manage retirement plans, they're out there. You just got to go search and find what you want to use. I360, there's us, there's a couple other platforms out there, but I've been doing it a long time and I think RPAG's got the best. That's just not the plug, but again, it's made my life so much easier as an advisor.
Yeah, I love to hear it. And why go it alone, right? When there's tools like that available.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So one example you shared with us, I'd love to hear the illustration, is a plan that you took over early in your career that I think was like less than $1 million with tremendous growth. I'd love to hear you share that.
Yeah, it was, again, talk about partners, as a record keeper that I'd been doing some business with, and they had an opportunity. The plan was looking for a new advisor, so they brought me in, and it was early in my career, right? And when I got into the plan business, so a $750,000 plan was a big plan. Mm-hmm. We were trying to gather assets, and it was something. It was they had 200 and some employees, and when I went in there, I noticed that they just didn't have any participation. They were about 15-20% participation.
Really, that low? Was it?
Yeah.
just they weren't that informed?
Yeah, it was a manufacturing group, with a lot of lower paid people, and they just didn't have anybody that was really helping them. So we took over the plan, and we made a big push to get the participation up. We didn't do the automatic enrollment because it wasn't available at that time, right? But we just worked on it, and then when it came available, we added it. But why are we in this business, right? I mean, you got to have compassion to do it. You really do. And if you talk about a benefit, well, who's the benefit for? It's for the participants. We do a lot to make sure that the plan sponsors stay out of trouble, but all in all, it's about getting those participants help, right? And, there was a couple guys that were sitting in there, and I was going through my spiel, and they were kind of looking at me, and they were kind of being, okay, we have a question. And so I said, why don't we just meet one-on-one, right? So after the meeting, we sat down with them, and I encouraged them. I said, hey, this is something that you guys need to do. Never put any money away before in his life. Fast forward to the day, the plan's worth about $22 million in assets. We've got like 85% participation rate. This gentleman called me. He's ready to retire. And he came to me, and he came in my office. We sat down and talked. He's got $800,000 in his retirement account and more assets than what the plan had when I first took it over. But after those years, I went home that night, and I just told my wife, I said, today was a wonderful day. I was able to change somebody's life 20 years ago. And, he's got a house in California that's worth some money, but that's, he's got $800,000. He would not have had that if we wouldn't be able to help that man change his life. And so those are the kind of things that kind of keep you going. Even at my age, I still get encouraged about meeting with participants. And the thing about it is our business, those little plans, I'll just think about 200 employees. They only had 15-20% participation. Yeah. But you build that out, and then the money keeps flowing in, and then you'll get rewarded down the road for the work that you've done, right?
That's right.
I remember when I first got into the industry,
compounding interest.
Go ahead.
The power of compounding interest as well.
Amazing, right? Amazing. And it was just doing the right thing, right? And helping somebody out. And so a lot of those things we see now that I've been in it so long, we get those calls and we have these meetings, and I look at account balances and I'll recognize the name and I'll go, wow, just amazing. We practice what we preach. That's how I manage my portfolio too. I put as much as I can. I let the markets work and go on about my business. And so
that's very gratifying. And you get the
very gratifying.
See the effects of that and how it changes and improves people's lives.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's amazing.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I would imagine, do you tell that story often, Lloyd, for plan advisors or plan participants, as well as even sponsors, as they're trying to figure out their own journey? Because that's a great illustration if you help somebody fast forward in their own life by 20 years. Yeah,
no, it's part of the whole pitch, right? When you're having the sales, we talk about employee communication, education all the time, and I think the biggest thing that, we have to, especially in my market, I'm in a small to mid market. I don't really mess in the big jumbo plans like some of the good advisors out there do. But, the whole thing about it is in our business is you've got to take the time to educate the plan sponsor as well.
Yeah.
Right. They're small business owners. They're business owners. Yeah, this is a benefit, but do they really understand the benefits of what they're giving to the participants? So not only do we need to educate the participants, we need to educate those plan sponsors to do the automatic enrollment. It's a hard task, right? When you go to business owners and say, well, my employees make $18 an hour. You want me to put away 6% of their income for them? Yeah, I do. Right? It's not going to make any difference. They're going to be able to budget it, but yeah, it'll make a difference over time. And then you share that story with them. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, it makes a difference.
Yeah, that's a great proof point to that very theme that you're preaching.
Yeah.
So in that spirit, as we wrap up this conversation, Lloyd, I'd love to hear advice that you would give to a young Lloyd Engleman. Go back in time, if you would. Imagine our time machine. We're going to go back 20 or 30 years to the beginning of our careers, you and I. And if you could have a moment with yourself and give some advice, or for that matter, anybody, let's say in their 20s who's starting it as a plan advisor, what principles would you be preaching?
Yeah, the biggest thing, I remember when I first got in the business, my father was still alive, and he was out here visiting from Nebraska. We were big horse racing fans, so my dad would come out 45 days. We'd go Santa Anita, Del Mar, and Hollywood Park was still around at that time. We'd just kind of make our little circuit for about 40 days. We weren't big gamblers. My dad just loved it. We'd sit, one of those special times sitting over the breakfast table in the morning, reading the racing form with your pops, having a cup of coffee. Those are the greatest days. But I remember there was a gentleman in my neighborhood. He was in the insurance business, right? He wasn't really into financial services. My dad asked him, he goes, how can he do in this business? And I'll never forget it. This gentleman, his name was Jay Coyne. He said, Lloyd, he goes, your son can make as much money as he wants to in this business. Just work hard and take care of the client and the money will come. And he was dead on, right? Don't worry about the self-gratification early. Do what's right, because you will find out in our business, people move to different jobs. If you create that relationship with those HR managers, with those CEOs, when they go to another place, they're going to look, because what you've done for them and before, they're going to want to surround themselves with good people, just like you're trying to surround yourself with good people. And you'll be able to have a referral source that'll last you your lifetime. Those words of encouragement from that gentleman that time just said, yeah, just do what's right and work hard, and you'll be very, very successful in this business. So that's what I would say to people. Stay with it. It's a fun business. I've been very blessed in my life over the time. I never, ever would have thought I'd have been in the position I am today. 25 years ago when I got into this business, I had no idea, but it's been fantastic.
That's a wonderful illustration, Lloyd, and inspiring one too. That's a great place to leave this conversation, for which I thank you for sharing your story and your insights. And I'm looking forward to another conversation. Join us again in a future episode of Gray to Great. Lloyd, thank you again.
Dan, thank you so much for everything. Have a good rest of your day.
You too, Lloyd. Cheers.
All right.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Thanks for tuning in to Gray to Great. I hope you're walking away with a few new ideas, a few bold strategies, and a bit more fuel to take your business further than ever. If you found today's conversation valuable, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a colleague. The best way to stay sharp is to keep learning together. So I'll see you next time right here, where we will cut through the noise to bring you what really matters. Until then, keep pushing forward, because there's no gray area in achieving success.